Halo Infinite Releasing Firefight has caught my attention. The game mode is a lot of fun, and the weapons are very fun to use. That being said, some are better than others, and today I'll be making a tier list of the weapons I believe are top tier and bottom tier. The important thing to understand is that sets are now called waves, and when you beat a wave, your ammo from the weapon holders will respawn. There are a lot of varieties to choose from when it comes to weapons, but before I get into it, a couple things. I will be using Heroic Firefight as a baseline for the difficulty. Most of these weapons will be the same for normal, but I definitely don't recommend this list as a guide for Legendary Firefight. Some Legendary variants drop from the boss waves, and I played a lot of Firefight in order to try to use these weapons, but there is a chance I may have missed a couple. Any Legendary weapons I haven't encountered will be at the end of the video, and I will rank it based off of the campaign usage. That way, if the weapon happens to be in Halo Infinite Firefight, you'll have at least a generalized idea about using it. And lastly, this is my opinion about the weapons after playing with them. You may feel differently about certain weapons, and that's okay. Now let's get into the worst weapon on this list.
You are a worthless, friendless little piece of shit whose mommy left daddy.
The worst weapon in Halo Infinite Firefight has gotta be the Pulse Carbine. I know I talk a lot of crap about the plasma assault rifles in Firefight, but honestly, they just aren't good. Let's break it down into two parts. Shielded and unshielded damage. I hate to say it guys, but most plasma weapons are nothing more than okay when it comes to shield damage. When you compare it to kinetic weapons, yes, they do slightly more damage towards shields, and as for unshielded targets, well, why would you want to use a plasma gun when so many guns can one-shot to the head? But in my opinion, it's not worth it to carry around something that is only okay for one situation. I would bother with it unless you're just completely out of ammo. You guys are probably looking at me right now thinking I'm absolutely nuts putting such an iconic pistol down here in D tier. But hear me out. The plasma pistol is very much like the plasma repeater. It does okay damage against shield with its primary fire comparable to the plasma repeater. But where I have a problem with this weapon is in its charge shot. The only time I've been able to successfully destroy shields with a single shot is with blue lesser elites, jackal shields, or the shielded brutes. Every other enemy takes a bit more plasma energy to take down. But here's another problem. Jackals can be one-shot or grenaded, so there's no need for it there. Blue elites don't spawn as frequently as red elites do, and shielded brutes are much more rare than that. And the final reason I put it all the way down here is that the charge time is much longer than the other plasma pistols that I have used in the other games. Such a fall from grace. The Needler being able to super combine targets and do area of effect damage is a very nice concept in practice. However, in-game, most enemies will have to be literally touching shoulders with each other in order to make any sort of effort with this weapon useful. And I tried guys, believe me, I tried so hard to make this weapon work. It doesn't pierce shields and elites just love to run away from it. This gun is really only good against brutes and hunters, but since kinetic weapons can do much better damage to both these targets, I cannot recommend ever using this gun. Our first legendary weapon. Just take what I said about the plasma pistol and apply it here. The only reason it's in D+ is because it's technically better than the base plasma pistol, but that's not saying much. This version still can't fully deplete red elites in one shot, and it isn't very good for anything else. The Pinpoint Needler gives the Needler better targeting and a lower super combined requirement. I personally don't think it's enough to bump it up to C tier. With the right enemies and right positioning, yes, you can definitely get some kills with it, but 2 kills per mag isn't very good.
Was now weeping and slobbering all over my drum set.
The Rapid Fire Pulse Carbine is exactly what you think it is. It's a faster firing pulse carbine. With a faster firing, you can definitely chew through some shields with it, but honestly, I wouldn't hold on to it. Remember, it's only the fire rate that changes with it. The damage, overheating, and ammo are all the same, and you can't mix ammo with legendary weapons and regular weapons. The Ravager is an area of effect weapon, meaning you would think this weapon would be higher. Well, no. The weapon's ammo usage is astonishingly bad, and the charge shot doesn't do enough damage for me to recommend using it. I have seen people using the charge shot against hunters, as they don't really move, but I am still unclear about the amount of damage it even does to them. This weapon is good against groups of jackals and grunts, but like almost every weapon is good against jackals and grunts. To me, the Ravager feels like a weaker grenade that you're forced to carry in your weapon slot. I am unsure about the legendary version of the Ravager. This weapon bounces its projectile shot once before detonating again. Even the charge shot bounces off too. I much prefer the direct hits from the original Ravager as it's much easier to hit and land charge shot attacks. I think this weapon would be great indoors, I just think that's a bit too situation to be any higher than C. The Heat Wave is just an okay close quarters weapon. I don't think it's exceptionally powerful and the ammo for this doesn't help you. It's kind of the same as the Ravager, you'll probably get more out of this weapon indoors rather than outdoors, but 8 shots in the mag and 8 shots in reserve isn't the best thing in the world. You'll most likely end up using up all your ammo for this weapon during the first or second wave. The Hydra is an okay weapon. The explosive payload isn't as large as I'd like it, and I feel like this weapon forces you to use the lock-on effect for like every shot, or else you risk wasting a shot. You're given 18 shots in a 6-round mag. The reason I say this is because the Hydra has one of the slowest reloads in the entire game. If you want to make use of this weapon, I advise that you keep an okay distance, make sure you're fully reloaded, and make sure you're locking onto your desired target. The Stalker Rifle Legendary variant, in my opinion, is worse than the regular counterpart. The weapon has decreased damage in favor of a higher fire rate. This means you can go from being able to 1 to 2 shot enemies to 3 or 4 shotting enemies. If you had a choice between this and the regular version, go with the regular version. One thing I will give this gun credit for, it seems to have some sort of knockback or flinch capability, meaning some enemies can be stun locked until they're dead. But why would you want to do that when the regular version of this weapon could just one-shot those enemies? The Bulldog is a decent close-range weapon. It is able to do an okay amount of damage at close, and its fire rate lends it quite well to multiple enemies. Enemies have the ability to carry this weapon too, giving you more ammo to use. However, I can't ignore the fact that this weapon's damage is incredibly inconsistent. Sometimes this weapon can 2-tap targets, and if you're slightly out of its range, you could end up 4-tapping targets. The Cinder Shot is pretty much like the Hydra, except instead of locking onto targets, you move the shot with your crosshair. It does better damage and has a better area of effect than the Hydra. The reason it's in B tier is because the Cinder Shot suffers from the same ammo problem as the Hydra. The Cinder Shot does way more damage overall. If you somehow end up getting more ammo for this gun, I would highly recommend keeping it. The Assault Rifle is pretty consistent when it comes to damaging and killing enemies. The reason I put it in B tier is because in every difficulty, you respawn with it, meaning you'll get a decent amount of ammo when you come back. The Assault Rifle is just okay at about everything, but it's not really good at one thing. The Energy Sword is another weapon that has fallen from grace. The sword went from 10% per hit to 14% per hit. Not only that, the weapon is unable to one-shot stronger elites and brutes like it used to back in the day. It's a good weapon if you're getting rushed or forced to play in a tight spot. The Bloodblade is exactly like the regular energy sword, except it's red. I've only ever seen this weapon drop on the last boss wave, but nevertheless, it's just a regular energy sword reskin. Just take what I said about the regular energy sword and apply it here. The only reason it's a slight bit higher than the regular energy sword is because it gives you better agility. The Skewer is a hard-hitting single projectile weapon that has an incredibly long reload. The weapon is able to deal a lot of damage to any target you body shot, or one-shot most targets if you hit the head. I think if your aim is pretty good, you would put this weapon in A tier, but if your aim isn't good like mine, you'd put this weapon in the B tier, and that's why I put it in the B+. The Sniper Rifle is an easier version of the Skewer, dealing huge amounts of damage to the body and head for both shielded and unshielded targets. The reason I can't put this weapon in A tier though, is because the weapon only has 8 shots when you pick it up. If this gun had the ability to get more ammo besides weapon drops, I would rank it a bit higher. I'm going to group all the turrets into one section. All the turrets do something a bit differently, but are overall the same in my opinion. The chain gun has an incredibly fast fire rate, making it perfect for mowing down unarmored targets, but it's still good against shields. The plasma turret fires hard-hitting plasma bolts that are perfect for shields, but can also do good body shot damage. The scrap cannon is a weird hybrid. It fires explosive bolts that are better towards unarmored targets, but the bolts are powerful enough to take on shields.
The Sentinel Beam is just okay when it comes to dealing with most targets. It's kind of like the Assault Rifle. It's good, but when it's very average damage, you may end up using up more ammo than you think just trying to aim with this damn thing.
So now we're getting into the weapons I think you should be using or should pick up when you get the chance. The first weapon in A tier is going to be the Stalker Rifle. The regular Stalker Rifle is able to headshot targets without shields and take off helmets with ease. There are better weapons that do its job better, but if you're needing a weapon that is able to headshot and has pretty decent ammo drops and ammo usage, I would recommend using this. The Shock Rifle is a very unique weapon. The weapon is able to headshot targets from afar, but it also has the unique effect of shocking and stunning targets if you put enough shots into them. Also, shocking targets chains them to other targets as well, making this one of the best secondary weapons to carry around. I can't put it in S tier because the weapon's slow rate of fire can be very annoying, and only having 5 shots in the mag means you're most likely going to be reloading constantly with this weapon. Take what I said about the Shock Rifle, that was bad, and reverse it to the Disruptor. Faster fire rate with a larger mag at the cost of lower damage and more shots required to shock targets. There is an argument to be made whether or not the Disruptor is better or worse than the Shock Rifle. Personally, I would put the Shock Rifle higher because of its ability to one-shot, but for closer ranges, you may favor the Disruptor. Putting the Rivet Mangler here kind of confuses me. It fires what seems to be a very powerful rivet shot, but from using it, it doesn't seem to do any more damage than a regular Mangler shot. If I'm using this weapon wrong, please leave a comment and inform us how you get any usage out of this weapon, because I can't. So I'm just going to come out and say this. I think the Gravity Hammer is way better than the Energy Sword. It does the same amount of damage, but it has an area of effect ability that is much more suited for firefight. I wouldn't rely on the Gravity Hammer too much, only using it for defensive purposes. I personally have not noticed a real difference between the Rushdown Gravity Hammer and the regular one. I know this one increases your movement speed, but the movement speed buff isn't as noticeable as you may think. But you should be helping holding down the hill and not just running around. Use this weapon like you'd use a regular hammer, defensively. I didn't even know the sidekick was in the game until I went into custom games. While yes, the gun is able to one-shot enemies to the head, the damage isn't very good, and having to remain close to your enemies to stay accurate isn't the best. Considering there are much better weapons, it's good, but there are way better options. While I think the UNSC grenade is good, the reason it's not in S tier is because you only get this weapon from specific ammo drops or from respawning. It's good at what it does, which is an explosive device you don't have to take a weapon slot for, but it's not dropped from enemies, so it's not S tier. The rocket launcher is a very powerful weapon. Its ability to clear groups of enemies with ease is very nice to have, and the damage it can do to stronger targets cannot be understated. As well, you can do something like this with it. That's right, you can destroy a Phantom with it. Now I know that looks really cool. In practice, most enemies will be able to leave the Phantom before you're able to destroy it. Another cool thing is that enemies can drop ammo for it, which makes this weapon way better than the other power weapons because ammo is able to drop for it. I can't squeeze it into S tier because while I said enemies can drop ammo for this weapon, that's a bit on the rarer side of things. I'm gonna group the Spike and Plasma Grenades together since they fulfill the same role. Both grenades drop heavily from enemies, and grenade spamming groups of targets is a legit strategy, especially if the targets are just spawning in or taking over your hill. I would say the Plasma Grenade is better, but I'll leave that to your own personal interests.
The Arcane Sentinel Beam does a lot of damage. Like, this gun can absolutely mow down almost any type of enemy with ease. The only drawback with this weapon is its ammo. You don't get a lot of it, and holding down the trigger can lead to a lot of missed shots, which you don't want to do when using this weapon.
Now we're getting to the best of the best weapons to use in Halo Infinite. The first one in S tier has gotta go to the Calcine Disruptor that drops from the Grunt boss wave. This weapon takes the main flaw of the Disruptor and gets rid of it, with it taking significantly less shots to shock enemies. If you use this weapon properly and conserve its ammo, you will absolutely demolish the wave. The Purging Shock Rifle is so damn powerful. Not only can this weapon one-shot headshot, its shock has been increased in power, meaning smaller targets and regular brutes are able to get shocked in just one shot.
Not only that, when the targets get shocked, it also shocks other targets. I cannot understate how powerful this weapon's shocking ability is, and how powerful this weapon's group damage capabilities are. The Mangler is a pretty powerful mid to close range weapon, being able to headshot targets and being able to deal a good amount of damage towards shields. As well, the Mangler's increased melee damage complements the weapon very nicely. Shoot at a target a bit, and then when he gets close, the increased melee damage will finish them off. I can understand putting this weapon in maybe A tier, as it doesn't do very good for long range capabilities, but for the way I play, it works very well. The Diminisher of Hope is a much more powerful gravity hammer. It has better range and better area of effect abilities. I find this weapon only really spawns on the last boss wave like the Bloodblade, so its usage may be low, but nevertheless it's a great weapon to use. The shock grenade is the best grenade out there. Being able to shock and stun almost any target makes this a must-have for Firefight. It drops from the skimmers, meaning you will probably end up with a lot of shock grenades to use. Alright, so you made it to the final 3 weapons, and it should be no surprise that all the UNSC weapons are in S tier. The first one has gotta be the classic battle rifle. It's the least ammo effective out of the 3 rifles, as it can only be picked up from the wall. That being said, if you're able to use kinetic ammo refilling bays, then it's an absolute no-brainer to keep this weapon as long as you can. You guys know how awesome it is. 3-round burst, extremely accurate, and being able to one-shot targets easily. The Commando is the most inaccurate out of the UNSC rifles. That being said, tap firing with this weapon will give you the best accuracy to fire rate ratio. This weapon not only drops from the wall, but it also drops from enemies as well. It's a great weapon to choose from if you end up running low on your other preferred rifle. There are 2 versions of the Bandit, one with the scope and one without a scope. While I prefer the one you spawn in with, which is the one with the scope, both versions of the rifles are equally good. Good damage, accurate, one-shot potential, and enemies can drop ammo for it. That's all the weapons for Halo Infinite Firefight. Normally. So here's the thing, while I believe I have covered all the weapons you can get normally in matchmaking Firefight, custom games let you spawn in with any weapon. So now I'm gonna go cover the weapons that I don't normally think would spawn and rank them in no particular order. I may have some campaign footage over top of some of the weapons, but I'll do my best to at least showcase the weapon on screen. Again, this is just a reskin of the basic energy sword. It doesn't even have the infected energy sword title on it, it just says energy sword. This is just the regular battle rifle. I don't know the changes to it, but it's pretty much the same. Another goddamn battle rifle. Jeez. Anyway, the Breacher battle rifle says it does more damage when you get closer to the target, but honestly, I haven't really noticed the change in damage. The assault rifle was never noted for being a long-range gun. The assault rifle was a medium close-range gun that was meant to weaken or finish off targets. The long-shot version losing about 10 shots while increasing accuracy is nice, but those missing shots help a lot more than you think. The Pursuit Hydra has better targeting and a faster rocket velocity. I think better than the Hydra for sure, but its damage still isn't the best. This version of the sniper rifle gives you way more ammo, a larger mag, and better no-scoping capabilities in exchange for lower damage. You'll definitely feel the lower damage if you shoot shields or body shot brutes. Giving the sidekick more damage makes this gun comparable to the rifles. Its accuracy is still kinda sucky, but the damage makes up for it. The Impact Commando's damage has been increased with the double mag for being way more inaccurate. The Commando is still pretty inaccurate when you burst fire it, so putting an even harsher accuracy penalty balances weapon out a little bit, and I think it's just as good as the regular version. The Scatterbound Heatwave is supposed to drop from the Yellow Elite, but for what I've played, he only drops a regular version of it. This Heatwave is able to bounce off walls and track straight back to the enemy, potentially doing double damage if you're in an enclosed space. This weapon is dropped from a brute that I haven't seen yet. Regardless, I don't think a tracking rocket launcher would be the best thing in the world. The reason why the rocket version is higher is because you can potentially get more ammo for the regular version. The Backdraft Cinder Shot is supposed to come from the Hunter bosses, but I suppose it makes sense that they wouldn't drop from them because they're using different weapons. This weapon would have multiple explosions in one, effectively making it one of the best crowd control weapons out there. Well, Who would have thought increasing the range, damage, and ammo would finally make an amazing close quarters weapon that's capable of melting shielded and unshielded enemies from an acceptable range. The volatile skewer is supposed to drop from the brute that carries the scrap cannon, but I have only ever seen him drop his scrap cannon, and nothing else. The skewer has an explosive payload, making it one of the more deadlier weapons to use. That's all the weapons for Halo Infinite Firefight. Thank you so much for watching. This list took a while, so please leave a like and comment on which weapons you would change with this list. Thanks again guys, and take care.